We are live. All right. I have to rant. I just want to make sure that my stream goes live. Then I'm going to minimize chat and we are going to dig into this. Now, I have to warn you, this is going to be fairly black-pilled. I'm just waiting for the stream to come through. We'll see if I did. Did I set this up correctly? My stream is not live. I'm going to keep talking. Maybe the video's delayed. So this is going to be fairly black-pilled. Yes. All right. We're good. Minimizing chat. I have mentored thousands of aspiring developers. And I have built up a huge list I have of gripes with aspiring developers. And often they are the result of mismanaged expectations and aspiring developers being very stubborn with what they believe that they need to do, what is enough to become a developer. And over the years, I have had very candid conversations because I think they're needed. Because there are a lot of content creators that'll sugarcoat way too much. And what happens is so many aspiring developers will be set off with false expectations, and they will invest so much time, they will dip into their savings, they'll quit their job, and then 6 months rolls around, a year rolls around, and they give up. They can't afford it anymore. They give up. They go back to their old job if they can still get it. They get a part-time job to be able to pay the bills that racked up. And I feel like recently, I don't think this is a secret, the market fucking sucks. It's terrible. Like, I don't think we should be sugarcoating that. The entry-level market is very rough right now. There are aspiring developers that are getting jobs every single day, and there are significantly more aspiring developers that are not. That are 6 months in, that are a year in, that are 2 years in, that are 3 years in, that are 5 years in, that are 10 years in, that continue to just go off of the same bad strategies, which now are even more important with the rough market, and they will eventually give up. Most of you will not become developers. That is the reality with this market right now. So, with that said, I'm hoping I can rant and I can share so many of the holes in people's strategy of becoming a developer, and I'm going to be very candid, and I'm probably going to come off like an asshole. I'm going to be very black-pilled like this because I feel like some of this messaging towards aspiring developers, and quite frankly, even other developers that are giving you this advice that you label as gatekeepers, that you label as elitists, that are trying to tell you the depth of knowledge that you need to have, I feel like it's not sinking in. So this is my attempt. So let's start with Next.js and the JavaScript ecosystem in general. Next.js is a tool, a very interesting tool that quite frankly makes front-end developers' lives much easier. It's built on so many abstractions of problems that have been solved already. The tool exists for a good reason. But I think so many developers and aspiring developers get caught up in what's trendy and they forget it is just a tool. And these tools become more complex building blocks where you don't have any fucking idea how any of this works under the hood. No idea. And you lean on this for a learning tool. It blows my mind how many front-end developers or aspiring front-end developers are learning JavaScript and React at the same time when they jump into Next.js, which is their first tutorial. I can't believe people are actually falling for courses like that. I have seen so many aspiring developers, like I've watched them code, I pair program with them, I reviewed their code, it's in the thousands at this point. And I can tell you, the majority, and this spans years back, 7 years when I first became a professional developer, this was still a major problem and it's only gotten worse. People's fundamentals suck. They suck so bad, you have no idea. So let's talk about the JavaScript world. JavaScript gets a lot of shit. It gets a lot of shit. It's just one of those languages that has become so popular and has been given the ability to build anything you want, to be able to create entire companies from it. It can build the entire full stack. And that is powerful. And that is awesome. And if you've worked in the JavaScript world at all as a front end or back end developer, you will realize it is a fucking mess compared to certain other stacks. JavaScript has so many damn abstractions because it's doing way more than it was meant to originally do. It was built too quickly to accommodate all of this. And we continue just putting Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid on JavaScript. And most aspiring developers are following full stack JavaScript tutorials and courses that are going the alternative path. They have no solid programming foundation whatsoever. They have no system design, no architecture patterns, even at a basic level that you're going to get from a CS degree. There is no fucking foundation. It is the Wild West. You dive in and you build something, which is a really cool way to get into coding. You can jump into an abstraction and build something and see it change in front of you. That is fun. That makes programming fun. That's why a lot of people like front end so much, because it gives you that reward right away, where you can see things moving on the page and you could just see all these interactions forming, and you can, with these abstractions, build them fairly quickly with the more abstractions that you bring in. The problem is, maybe this is just venting about the JavaScript ecosystem and just all the JavaScript courses. The problem is so many aspiring developers don't go past the abstraction. They just don't. They don't let's jump into React because so many developers want to jump into React. They don't understand the convenience of hooks and what's happening under the hood. They just remember the syntax. If I want to trigger this specific function just once when the component loads, I write this. Why? Why does it work? How does it work? Why the fuck does this virtual DOM exist with a really cool state management system? Why is this even a solution? Why do front-end developers need this? Because you haven't built shitty apps that have to try to scale, that you need to manage, and the code gets more and more complex, and you're just figuring out, how the hell do I just organize this? Because in reality, and this is kind of unfortunate, but a lot of front-end developers are pushing way more code on the front end to do a lot more. With single page applications has really pushed this culturally in JavaScript. And people just don't dive into trying to implement the solutions that were so messy to begin with. And even when you dive, I guess I'm going to pick on the front end world for a little bit, and we'll dive into backend, trust me. But they won't even dive into kind of a lot of good CSS fundamentals good is the wrong word. A lot of CSS fundamentals that a lot of us used before we had CSS Grid, before we had Flexbox. You take CSS Grid and Flexbox away from most front-end developers and they will flop. They are lost. It is going through courses, it's going through documentations. They have no fucking idea what to do. We are developing a world of developers where just a few make it in with just this abstract knowledge. We're just leaning on this too hard. And a lot of the crappy solutions and implementing them, for some reason, people are giving the really, really stupid advice of not diving back into these fundamentals, building some of this really messy spaghetti code, figuring out how to organize it the best way possible, and then building your own custom organizational pattern, building your own custom state management to be able to organize this as your app grows. There are plenty of companies, and especially when you get to a higher level where, man, you're building a custom Redux solution, you're building a custom MIDI framework. on top of kind of an app that doesn't really need a full-fledged single-page application. And most importantly, when you experience these weird, quirky React bugs and you mix it with a bunch of other custom JavaScript, there are so many developers, and especially aspiring developers, that have no idea where the errors are coming from, if they're errors produced by the framework, if they're errors produced by their own custom code. How the hell do you debug it when your application grows and grows and grows? You build a bunch of shitty code without the abstractions. You get lower level with what you're learning. You dive back into the fundamentals. And I say this, and I know a lot of other really good developers say this. And somehow, in the JavaScript world, there are still courses that are making so much fucking money pushing people right through these abstractions with an extremely shaky foundation, and they just keep populating. This is why people hate the JavaScript world, because it has become so complex, and it's very difficult to understand, not necessarily because of the complexity, but because the complexity is hidden, especially throughout the entire aspiring developer's learning journey. Companies hire good developers with good fundamentals and good foundations. You want to know why companies aren't taking many chances on alternative education developers or developers that just couldn't get a CS degree? It's because they suck. They don't dive into the fundamentals. They don't showcase that. They fail the coding challenges, not because they're not memorizing an algorithm, because they show that they can't problem solve. They can't work through more complex problems that force you to dive deeper into JavaScript and understand its weird-ass quirks. JavaScript is not a clean language. It's a beautiful language because of the opportunities it creates, but it's a double-edged sword because it's getting people to just get comfortable and complacent with becoming a programmer and skipping over the fundamentals over and over and over. Like, if this was just a few developers, it's not that big of a deal, but this has been a widespread problem for the 7 years that I've been mentoring aspiring developers, and it's just getting worse. And the problem is, the market's getting worse too. So you have both of these things contributing to so many people struggling to become developers. Now, I'm not sure if this is a problem in other backend focused stacks. I'm not sure. I really don't know. I know the JavaScript world. I know the React world. And I know the Node.js world. So let's dig into Node.js. There are actually people that call themselves full stack developers that literally have learned nothing about building a front end and building a back end. We're not even going to get into the DevOps portion or like hosting something at a cloud provider. I am literally talking about people who still have not learned the difference, the separation of concerns between front end and back end alone, let alone creating the architecture for your backend. And if you do it in Node.js and you do it with Express and you look at professional code bases, holy shit, is it messy? The conventions are different. Like, this is why I'm a fan of Nest.js. This is why I'm learning it. I want to get more comfortable with a little bit more accepted conventions, but when you just have Express for the routing system, and it's a wild west when you don't have very opinionated frameworks on the backend. So many people are coming out of learning Next.js and expecting a full stack or a backend position. That is crazy. When I think of the curriculums at coding bootcamps, most coding bootcamps have produced full stack developers that have come out being able to put a basic application with Express together. They have maybe they have an ORM, maybe they have an ORM and they could build a potentially scalable application, but often it's maybe some MIDI library doing some custom SQL commands to then, build a basic CRUD app and connect to the database. But that's the start. That's just the start, being able to get a basic routing set up and serve some assets and do some business logic. And then you have to learn to scale it. You have to learn all of the flaws of everything that you fucked up with organizing your backend application because you chose Express and that is it. All of those flaws, as your application scales, you have to identify those. You have to challenge your application. If it were to like take in this many requests, is this service actually going to be a little bit, is it going to be efficient? Like, you need to challenge your applications with heavy data and just constantly processing this business logic to see how it quickly breaks down, and then be able to add like 5 developers onto the application that you built. Could you very easily show them exactly how your application works? Do all of your methods and functions and organization easily spell out some of the more complex areas of your backend? Or do you just flood your code with a bunch of documentation because you didn't focus on good architecture and good naming? Because you haven't really followed conventions with Express, because there are no fucking conventions. It is a wild west. There are so many frameworks and other stacks that are very opinionated for a reason, because it's easy to bring someone in and ramp someone up. I don't think Node.js is a good backend for aspiring backend developers. It blows my mind. And all that to say, there's so much more to dig into the backend. You still have you have people that dove into Next.js calling themselves full stack developers. Most full stack positions don't hire junior developers, but somehow this entire coding bootcamp industry, somehow all these content creators and course creators have convinced you a full stack position is the first position that you need to go for as a junior developer. They are not friendly to you. Generally, companies hire full stack developers that can hit the ground running. They hire experienced full stack developers. You have exceptions to the rule, but I think people prop up these exceptions that happen and these wins that happen and create entire courses, and their entire advice revolves around pushing you to have the most cookie cutter surface level knowledge because you're only trying to become a developer within a year in the alternative path, and you are just one of 500. Everyone else has the same surface level knowledge that you have. There is a curiosity of coding that is very attractive to employers. Employers want to hire developers that have dug a little bit deeper into the problems that they also solve in their professional application. They're looking at your applications and trying to figure out what the hell interests you in coding. What are you diving deeper into? What has you curious? Because a curious developer that doesn't accept these surface level abstractions and understanding will dig deeper, and they'll want to know why the hell this works or why it doesn't work. What are the limitations? Try dealing with a shitty ORM and really crappy documentation. I'm not talking about use sequelize. Try dealing with that, and try dealing with all of the errors that you might potentially experience, all the limitations that you might potentially experience without good fundamental knowledge of what the hell is happening in a lot of the methods and a lot of the classes that you're bringing into your code. Have you ever even looked at source code of these frameworks, of these libraries, and dug into exactly what's happening? I know that was a big struggle for me in the beginning, to actually dig into a lot of these abstractions and figure out line by line, how do these work? Most developers don't even do that anymore. I don't think I want to get into the DevOps portion. You know what? I think I've ranted enough about backend. I'm going to keep this short with the DevOps. But I think maybe this is just coming from like the Next.js world, this cult of like, it's fine as a tool. I just don't know why so many aspiring developers are adopting it as a learning tool. And I'm telling you, everyone that's pushing Next.js, I'm telling you, all of these developers are not going back into the fundamentals as thoroughly as you think they are. This needs to be emphasized more in courses. And if you are emphasizing it, you need to emphasize it even more. This is a big problem. But I feel like it's just easy to toss up an app and like an easy hosting solution and avoid setting up like a cloud hosting solution. Like it blows my mind how many full stack or aspiring full stack and backend developers won't just set up a cloud solution. Like just set it up with AWS. It has a very generous free tier, very, very cheap. And I believe you could set a budget and a cap if you're worried about any like DDoS attacks or anything. I've had people mention that. Like people are worried about shit that they don't need to be worried about. But I feel like even aspiring backend and full stack developers are just scared to touch DevOps. And they say, oh, I'm wearing multiple hats. What the fuck do you think so many backend developers have done like their whole career? They didn't just say, you know what, this is just my domain. I'm comfy here. I'm comfy with this abstraction. You know what, like you deal with this problem. No, a lot of good backend developers were promoted into senior engineers because they figured it out. Whatever the company needed, whatever automations needed to be built, even if it's just developer tools, even if it's a build process, backend developers stepped up and they figured out how to even dive into the DevOps world, how to set up this automation. And they were curious and they were hungry and they were excited about it. But for some reason, so many aspiring backend developers don't want to dig into things that are difficult. And you know what I think it is? Because I don't think aspiring developers are giving themselves enough time. I don't think aspiring developers are giving themselves runway. They're quitting their jobs, they're joining coding boot camps, and then they expect to get a job within 6 months. There's self-taught developers quitting their jobs, expecting to get a job in a year. And like there are many who will take 2, 3, 4 years to get that position. And it gets tough when you get towards that end, your money's running out. You just start trying to push out applications, and do the bare minimum possible that you think you have to do because you're overwhelmed, because there's so much to learn, because you did not give yourself enough time. I see so many aspiring developers fucking themselves over that start off hungry to code, that start off excited to become a developer, and their motivation burns out. That fire burns out because it takes much longer than they think it's going to take them. And I see the solution as just being way more realistic about how long it's going to take to become a developer, about how much depth of knowledge you need to compete with CS grads who are also struggling in the market, who don't have marketable skills. Not necessarily. They have a good foundation. You have a competitive edge, but companies are always going to prefer the foundation, because if you look at like 6 months to a year, you bring in a CS grad, you bring in a coding bootcamp grad or self-taught, that CS grad will ramp up much faster, most of the time. That's why companies are hiring CS grads and not you. And you can combat that by diving into the fundamentals and being careful about how quickly you dive into the abstractions. And I highly encourage you to build very basic versions. If you're going to bring in an abstraction, build a basic version of that abstraction to kind of understand at least what's happening with it. You don't have to understand the specific details of how everything works, but you should understand what it's doing. Yeah, that's it. I feel like I can go on a rant in many other directions and expand here. But I wanted to share this because most aspiring developers are just going to give up. They're going to fail. And it's because they keep seeking out advice that just holds their hand and sugarcoats everything. And it's hurting so many aspiring developers. And like, you only have so much motivation and energy and money to become a developer. And I think if you just set yourself up better financially, if you just set your expectations up a little bit more and give yourself more time for a lot of even these fundamentals to just settle in and resonate. And I'm not talking months, I'm talking years. You are going to become a developer. You are going to become successful. And I think a lot of you, and I think a lot of you don't want to hear this, but a lot of you are in deep financial trouble with your timeline. And I pray that you handle your financial situation and you aren't just eating up the last bit of your savings to hopefully become a developer in 3 months and 6 months. Pick up a part-time job. Get some supplemental income. And freelancing is not it. Most freelance developers fail as well. That's another thing that people continue pushing. Most freelance developers, you're just an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs fail and they don't get enough income, and you're better off getting a part-time job and working as many hours as possible. But man, I want people to set themselves up for the long run. You do that, you financially prepare, and you set your mental expectations. You are going to have the runway to do it, and you're going to have the energy and the motivation to actually do what it takes to get to that finish line. Okay, that's it. That's my rant. Okay, I'm looking at chat. All right, what's up? How you guys doing? All right. Let me catch up on some of the chat, and I'll take a look at it. Wait a second. All right. What's up, Zinka? What's up, Mr. Organics? Millhouse? Andrew, Chris, Simon, Albert, Secondhand, Sabadai. I think I got Michael. How you guys doing? There is no way that I have one viewer watching me right now. There is no way. Really? That is crazy. I got a lot of likes. Type in chat if you're still here. I think I scared everyone away. I actually think I scared everyone away. Wait, everyone's still here. Oh, the viewer count is just... Oh, you guys are all here. Not here. Here. Okay. It shows one viewer watching right now. Okay. All right. Anyways, hello. Let me catch up with some of what you guys were saying. I knew I'd scare some people away, but I didn't think I'd scare everyone away. I know my fundamentals suck. I'm still taking JavaScript courses on my downtime to get better. Boot camps nowadays really fail in prepping you with the fundamentals. I'm still trying to catch up. Yeah, and you went through a coding boot camp that really leans on some abstractions, Zinka, as well. But yeah, and that's the solution, right? You realize your fundamentals are severely lacking, and you dig back into them. But you got to be willing to do that. You got to spend some time with it. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of time they got to spend with it and digging back into the fundamentals. Like, it's okay to go back into like CS50 in that course once, even when you kind of get done with the coding boot camp. Like, I think CS fundamental knowledge is really helpful. Especially the JavaScript world, there are so many abstractions that just really keep you from understanding trade-offs. This is why system design interviews are important. Hard problems to make a real-time counter. What should I learn after learning the fundamentals? Any free courses or anything I should do? You should build. Build. Okay, a lot of messages. I think YouTube is broken. It showed me, everyone was typing in chat, it showed me one person watching. I'm going to go back into the analytics later. I'll be honest, I was actually a little proud of myself I'm like, you know what? If I scared that many people away, I feel like a lot of people needed to hear this. Next.js is nice. Haven't heard it is, or I never said it was. I think you missed a point. Thanks for your work. Been following your reviews. All right. I'm exploring different bootcamp programs. Living in Canada, you have me a food insight into Brain Station Lighthouse, for example. Gotcha. We did do reviews on that. Okay. Reading the source code of things is a huge skill to have, and it's a hard skill to really build up. It's a hard skill to build up. I know it was really hard for me to dig into a lot of the code and just follow the logic, and I felt like my memory sucked. I remember that was a big, it was a misconception But it was a false realization that I had that my memory just sucked. And it blew me away how many other people that had a better fundamental understanding just had a good memory. And they had that memory to flow through. They remembered all the syntax. It's just because they've used a lot of the syntax to solve problems using the fundamentals that they learned through practical application. They reinforced it. Fundamentals are no longer a commonplace, unfortunately not. I delve into Next.js because an influencer told me to. Albert, that is... You're going to trigger me again. Don't do that. Don't do that. Problem is, university certificates aren't practical. First of all, certificates, so like a degree, or are you talking about certificate? Which are you talking about? I also think people aren't taught how to actually pivot work with real world business requirements, scenarios, scope creep, refactoring, etc., which is why you get a user base. I 100% agree with you, Chris. I 100% agree. But that's why you get a user base. Like, you can replicate high traffic. You can replicate high data and have it manage that. Like, you can create arbitrary data and problems for your application to solve. But ultimately, like, if you really want to build an application that's going to scale, you got to get users. You got to get feedback. You see it a lot with juniors that come in. Yeah, and yes. And to an extent, I think there needs to be an expectation for junior developers that you're not going to be, obviously, at a mid-level developer's experience with, like, especially with estimations on how long something is going to take, and being able to balance, like, okay, am I supposed to, like, touch this part of the code, which is actually kind of affecting the feature that I'm supposed to be building? What do I do, right? Like, and then, often you're going to ping a senior developer, whoever worked on that part of the code base, like, to get some extra context around that. Like, oh yeah, we were actually planning on rebuilding this component, but it does touch a couple places in the app. It's reused. So I think it actually could be a good challenge for you. You know what? Let me tackle this for you, right? I think that's going to be way too much of scope creep. It's going to just overextend you too much. Let me do this. I'll set you up, and then you can continue working on your features, so you have something usable to work with, right? And I think there's going to be there are going to be conversations with other developers on the team about that. But I think the skill level of being able to even just refactor your own code, it seems like it's lacking way more than it should be among junior developers. It's still showing me one watching. That's crazy. Let me see if people typed in Twitch too. I'm sorry. Holy shit. Everything is broken. Quite the rant. All right. So what's up? Ranger, Ignot, I am Speedy. Subscribe with Prime. I am Speedy. All right, let me turn my alerts on. Thank you, everyone. I do appreciate you. If you're still hanging out in Twitch, thank you, I am Speedy, for the Prime. I really appreciate that. All the Primes and YouTube memberships, they go directly towards my bills, so thank you. You've been doing that quite a bit, so how's it going, man? Let me connect to my Restream chat so I can see everything. And we'll answer questions a little bit for maybe about 15 minutes longer, and then I'm going to end the stream. Build what exactly? Here, let me link my article. This will give you a good idea. What types of projects? Type in that in Restream chat. Ultimately, you're going to play a role in figuring out what you need to build, but it's a long article. I highly recommend that you view that. Super Mario, thank you so much for the follow. I'm sure we got some other follows as well. If I missed your follow, I do appreciate it, but thank you. I just turned alerts back on. Let's get a little bit of music. Just a little bit. Let's go. Engu Meeks? I probably butchered that. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. What helped me was switching to Linux as an OS and using the terminal to do as much as possible and learning a lot of the peripheral tech that's not just coding. That's interesting. Oh God, we got to get into like GUIs versus getting more comfortable with the command line, especially for backend developers. There's so many directions I could have taken that. Certificates, university certificates. I think most certificates are going to be fairly worthless. Yeah. If you're talking about certificates, I would agree. I think you were kind of shitting on certificates. I don't think they're very valuable. The knowledge can be valuable. Just been bouncing back and forth between project work and tutorials. Usually when I hit a wall with my project work, I watch a video or two. Doesn't take long before something clicks and back to work. Nice. Good for you, Andrew. It takes time, man. It takes time for me. How many times, like, I'm literally diving into kind of like a lot of the material to review for my own cohort. And there are just some days where it's like, I've learned this like 5 times. I've built it several times, and I'm just blanking. I think it's okay to accept that your mind is just not processing things right now, and like getting up, walking, changing that flow of thinking, changing that context in which you are thinking about every single thought in by doing something different. It just shifts that pattern of thinking up. And a lot of people, it's okay to do that, because I think a lot of people just like, you know, get so frustrated and sit at the computer for hours stuck on the same thing. In reality, like, going for a run would have been tremendously beneficial for them being able to get closer to solving that problem. Yo, what's up, Neon? How you doing? I think that's part of the solution, is realizing you can't know everything or remember everything, but that it's okay to continue reading, learning, reviewing. Yeah. You know what? You know what's a good signal that I've seen for aspiring developers? I'll mention it with my own students. It's when, because I tell them there are certain abstractions that you can learn temporarily. I think it's okay for some abstractions to dive into and then dig into the weeds of that. And when they're like, I can kind of tell they're like, yeah, I don't want to accept that answer from you. Like, I want to dig into this and figure out why this is working this way. I want to figure out the underlying code of this library. And in reality, I think you know, some people could be a little bit stubborn about it, but that's also that stubbornness because of your curiosity, and like, it's just gnawing at you. Like, why the hell does this work this way? Why does it work this way? Like, I have to know. Like, that gnawing feeling, that curiosity, that push, that eventually pushes you into you digging a bit deeper. When developers want to continue digging a bit deeper, to me, that's a really good signal that they are developing the right problem-solving mindset and the right learning mindset and the right curiosity that is going to allow them to learn whatever they need to learn. They're going to be able to figure out whatever they need to figure out because they want to, because they enjoy it. They're curious about it. There's a great curiosity, but when you finally get a job, you got to learn to curb it. Yep, exactly. Yes, I agree with you, Chris. Sometimes because the company wants it done. Yeah, that was, that's a reality check that comes in. I agree. I almost applied to one because the quality of the material is very high, but I need to have hands-on experience faster, but I think they can be good for people with no background to learn basics. I think they need to be longer, and I think they need to spend more time on the fundamentals, and I'm supportive of that. I think just a lot of courses and coding boot camps need to be longer. Okay, that's it. I just want to get on a rant. I think that's all I have to say. I appreciate you guys typing in chat. Thank you for being patient. I did not look at chat the entire rant. I appreciate you guys liking the live stream. Thank you for the Twitch Prime. And yeah, we should be live on Friday for our normal Q&A. But guys, thanks for joining me with this one. I'm going to keep this up. You guys are welcome to listen to it again. You guys are welcome to post it to someone that it's going to trigger them, or some other content creator that's going to call me out for it. Like, it's fairly black pill, but I think a lot of aspiring developers will not make it. That's the reality. And yeah, that's it. I don't know what else to say. So hopefully the reasons why can give you some insight into what you could do differently, but I'll leave that up to you. All right, guys, have a good rest of your night. Good luck on all of your projects, and happy coding. Take care.